At 6:30 in the morning on June 6, 1944, the ramps of American landing craft dropped into the cold water off Omaha Beach, Normandy. Inside were young infantrymen from the United States 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions. Ahead of them lay open sand, minefields, barbed wire, concrete bunkers, and German machine guns positioned on high bluffs overlooking the shore. Many soldiers never reached dry ground. The sea was rough. Smoke concealed landmarks. Amphibious tanks sank before reaching the beach. Bombers had missed key defensive positions, and naval gunfire had failed to destroy many of the strongest bunkers. Men carrying radios, explosives, ammunition, and medical equipment struggled through water deep enough to drown them. This was only one section of a battlefield nearly 50 miles wide. More than 150,000 Allied troops were entering Normandy by sea and air. Thousands of ships and landing craft crowded the English Channel. American, British, Canadian, French, Polish, Norwegian, and other Allied personnel were taking part in the largest amphibious invasion in history. Behind the beaches stood Nazi Germany. Behind Germany stood nearly 5 years of occupation, mass murder, forced labor, and war across Europe. The contradiction was terrifying. The Allies possessed overwhelming industrial power, air superiority, and naval strength. Yet all of that power had to pass through a few narrow beaches defended by men who needed only to delay the invasion long enough for German reinforcements to arrive. How did the Allies place an army on Hitler's European fortress? And why did success depend not only on weapons and courage, but on weather forecasts, deception, logistics, and decisions made far from the battlefield? To understand D-Day, we must return to the moment when the invasion of France seemed almost impossible. In June 1940, France collapsed under the German offensive. British and Allied troops escaped from Dunkirk, but they abandoned much of their heavy equipment. Adolf Hitler now controlled most of Western Europe. German forces occupied the French coast from the Spanish border to the Netherlands, and Britain faced the threat of invasion across the English Channel. The German victory changed the geography of the war. Britain remained in the fight, but it no longer possessed a large army capable of returning to the continent. The United States had not yet entered the conflict. The Soviet Union was still bound to Germany by a non-aggression agreement. For a time, Hitler appeared to have closed the Western Front. That changed in June 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and again in December, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and the United States entered the war. Germany soon declared war on the United States. The conflict was now global, but the Allied powers did not agree on how Germany should be defeated. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin demanded a second front in Western Europe. The Red Army was absorbing the main weight of the German military, suffering losses on a scale almost beyond comprehension. Stalin wanted American and British forces to cross the English Channel and force Germany to divide its armies. American military leaders generally favored an early invasion of France. General George C. Marshall, the United States Army Chief of Staff, believed that Germany represented the greatest strategic threat and that the shortest road to victory led through northern France. British leaders were more cautious. Britain had already experienced the slaughter of the First World War, the defeat in France, and the evacuation from Dunkirk. Prime Minister Winston Churchill preferred operations around the edges of Nazi-controlled Europe. British strategy helped produce campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. Those campaigns weakened the Axis and provided valuable combat experience. They also delayed the direct invasion of France. This delay was not simple cowardice or indecision. An invasion across the Channel required capabilities that did not yet exist. The Allies needed landing craft, artificial harbors, transport aircraft, specialized armored vehicles, trained divisions, airfields, supply depots, fuel, ammunition, medical facilities, and control of the sea and sky. An army could land on a beach in a few hours. Keeping that army alive required years of preparation. By 1943, the strategic balance was shifting. German forces had suffered catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad. Allied armies had driven the Axis from North Africa and invaded Italy. American factories were producing ships, aircraft, tanks, trucks, and ammunition in extraordinary numbers. Britain had become a vast staging ground filled with men and machines. At the Tehran Conference in late 1943, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin confirmed that the cross-channel invasion would take place in 1944. The operation received the name Overlord. General Dwight D. Eisenhower became Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower was not the most celebrated battlefield tactician among Allied generals, but his role required something broader. He had to manage powerful commanders, competing national interests, political pressure, logistical problems, and the enormous risks of a multinational invasion. British General Bernard Montgomery commanded the Allied ground forces during the initial assault. Admiral Bertram Ramsay directed the naval operation. Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory oversaw the air plan. American generals Omar Bradley, Leonard Gerow, and J. Lawton Collins prepared major elements of the United States attack. The central strategic question was where to land. The shortest route crossed the Channel toward the Pas-de-Calais. It offered direct access to Germany and possessed major ports. German commanders understood its importance and expected that the main invasion might come there. That expectation made Normandy attractive. Normandy was farther from Germany, but its beaches could support a broad landing front. The area was within range of Allied fighters based in Britain. The port of Cherbourg could eventually support supply operations. Most importantly, German defenses there were less concentrated than those near Calais. Even so, Normandy was not undefended. Germany had spent years building the Atlantic Wall, a chain of coastal fortifications stretching from Norway to the French-Spanish border. The name suggested a continuous fortress. In reality, the defenses varied greatly. Some sectors contained powerful bunkers, artillery batteries, minefields, obstacles, and trenches. Other areas were incomplete. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, famous for his campaigns in North Africa, was assigned to inspect and strengthen the coastal defenses. Rommel believed the invasion had to be destroyed on the beaches. His reasoning was shaped by Allied air power. Once Allied troops established a bridgehead, German formations moving during daylight would face constant attack from fighter bombers. Rommel therefore wanted tanks and reserves positioned close enough to counterattack immediately. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the senior German commander in the West, favored a different approach. He believed the main armored reserve should remain farther inland, protected from naval gunfire and prepared to launch a concentrated counteroffensive after the location of the main Allied landing became clear. Both strategies contained logic. Together, they produced confusion. Hitler divided control of the armored reserves. Some panzer divisions remained under local commanders. Others could move only with approval from the highest level. This arrangement slowed decision-making at the precise moment when speed would matter most. The Allies planned to exploit that weakness through deception. Operation Fortitude created the illusion that the main invasion would strike the Pas-de-Calais. Intelligence officers constructed a fictional army group in southeastern England, supposedly commanded by General George S. Patton, whom the Germans regarded as one of the Allies' most aggressive generals. Inflatable vehicles, false radio traffic, controlled information leaks, double agents, and visible military activity supported the deception. Allied intelligence did not simply hide the truth. It offered German leaders a convincing alternative. The operation worked because it reinforced what many Germans already believed. Even after Allied troops landed in Normandy, Hitler continued to fear that the invasion might be a diversion, and that the main blow would still fall at Calais. German formations that might have reinforced Normandy remained in place. The invasion plan divided the Normandy coast into 5 landing zones. American forces would attack Utah and Omaha in the west. British troops would land at Golden Sword. Canadian forces would assault Juneau. Airborne divisions would drop behind the beaches to seize bridges, roads, and causeways, disrupt German movement, and protect the flanks. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions would land behind Utah Beach. The British 6th Airborne Division would secure the eastern flank, including bridges across the Orne River and Caen Canal. The plan was ambitious, but every element depended on timing. The invasion required a full moon for airborne operations, low tide to reveal German beach obstacles, and improving light for naval and air support. These conditions sharply limited the available dates. Then the weather deteriorated. Strong winds, rough seas, and low clouds threatened the operation. Thousands of ships were already moving into position. Troops had been sealed inside transports. Further delay increased the risk that German reconnaissance would discover the invasion fleet. Group Captain James Stagg, Eisenhower's chief meteorological advisor, predicted a brief improvement on June 6. German forecasters, working with less information from the Atlantic, expected the stormy conditions to continue. Rommel left Normandy and traveled to Germany. Eisenhower now faced the decision on which the entire operation rested. To proceed meant sending soldiers across violent seas into uncertain weather. To postpone meant recalling the fleet, reorganizing the invasion, and waiting for another suitable combination of tide and moon. A long delay could compromise secrecy. Eisenhower chose to go. During the night of June 5 and the early hours of June 6, aircraft carrying paratroopers crossed the French coast. Navigation proved difficult. Clouds, anti-aircraft fire, and confusion scattered many American units across the countryside. The airborne landings did not unfold according to plan, yet the disorder created unexpected advantages. Small groups of paratroopers attacked bridges, crossroads, gun positions, and German patrols from multiple directions. German defenders struggled to understand the scale and location of the airborne assault. On the eastern flank, British glider troops landed near the bridges over the Caen Canal and Orne River. Their precise arrival helped secure vital crossings before German forces could destroy them. At sea, the invasion armada approached Normandy. More than 5,000 vessels participated in the broader naval operation, from battleships and cruisers to destroyers, landing ships, minesweepers, and small landing craft. Allied warships bombarded German positions. Aircraft attacked transportation networks, artillery sites, and defensive strongpoints. The scale was overwhelming. The results were uneven. At Omaha Beach, American troops landed more than a mile from their planned location. The error could have produced confusion, but the actual landing area was less heavily defended. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the senior officer on the beach, decided to continue the attack from the new position rather than redirect the landing. Utah became the least costly of the 5 beach assaults. By the end of the day, American forces had established contact with elements of the 101st Airborne Division and moved inland. Omaha was different. The terrain gave the defenders enormous advantages. High bluffs overlooked the beach. Movement inland depended on narrow exits. German strongpoints covered the shoreline with interlocking fire. Elements of the experienced German 352nd Infantry Division had reinforced the sector, creating stronger resistance than Allied planners expected. The preliminary bombardment failed to neutralize many positions. Bombers, concerned about hitting friendly landing craft, released their weapons too late, sending bombs inland. Most amphibious tanks assigned to support the infantry were launched too far from shore, and many sank in the rough sea. The first assault waves were exposed. Units became mixed together. Officers and non-commissioned officers were killed. Radios were lost. Engineers attempting to clear obstacles worked under direct fire. Wounded men struggled as the rising tide moved around them. For a time, Omaha approached disaster. The Americans did not break through because the original plan worked perfectly. They broke through because individuals and small groups adapted after the plan failed. Infantrymen moved toward the base of the bluffs, where some German weapons could not easily reach them. Engineers opened gaps. Destroyers moved dangerously close to shore and fired directly at defensive positions. Junior leaders gathered scattered soldiers and pushed through weak points between German strongpoints. There was no single dramatic breakthrough. There were dozens of small ones. By afternoon, American troops had reached the high ground, but the Omaha bridgehead remained shallow and vulnerable. The cost was severe. Omaha accounted for a large proportion of American casualties on D-Day. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, British and Canadian forces also met mines, strongpoints, artillery, and determined resistance. Specialized armored vehicles helped solve problems that had proved deadly elsewhere. Some tanks carried flails to detonate mines. Others placed bridges over obstacles or fired heavy demolition weapons against concrete defenses. These machines reflected lessons learned from earlier amphibious warfare. Technology mattered because it served a tactical purpose. Canadian troops at Juno overcame heavy initial losses and advanced farther inland than many other units. British forces from Sword moved toward Caen, one of the most important objectives of the invasion. They did not capture the city on D-Day. This failure mattered. Caen controlled roads leading through eastern Normandy and offered terrain suitable for German armored counterattacks. The city would become the focus of weeks of destructive fighting. The Allies also failed to connect all 5 beachheads on the first day. Several planned objectives remained out of reach. Yet the most important result was undeniable. The invasion had survived. German commanders struggled to respond. Allied bombing had damaged bridges and railways. Resistance activity and airborne attacks disrupted communications. Allied aircraft dominated the daylight sky. German units moving toward Normandy faced delays, detours, and air attack. Command confusion made the problem worse. Hitler slept during the early hours of the invasion, and senior officers hesitated to wake him. The exact effect of this delay remains debated. since several factors restricted German movement, but the command system clearly prevented an immediate, unified armored response. The 21st Panzer Division eventually counterattacked between British and Canadian forces. Some German troops reached the coast, but the attack lacked sufficient support and withdrew after reports of additional Allied airborne landings. The opportunity to destroy the invasion at the waterline was disappearing. By midnight, approximately 156,000 Allied personnel had landed in Normandy by sea and air. Allied casualties were approximately 10,000, including more than 4,000 killed. German losses are more difficult to determine and are estimated across a wider range. French civilians also paid a terrible price. Allied bombing and naval gunfire struck towns, roads, bridges, and suspected German positions. The destruction intended to isolate the battlefield killed civilians and displaced families across Normandy. Liberation did not arrive without suffering. D-Day did not defeat Germany in one day. It did not destroy the German army in France. It did not immediately open a clear road to Paris or Berlin. What it did was create a front that Germany could not eliminate. The battle for Normandy lasted for weeks. Hedgerows limited visibility and turned small fields into fortified compartments. German troops fought skillfully from defensive positions. Allied armies struggled to break out while supply continued to flow across the beaches. Artificial mulberry harbors helped unload cargo, although one American harbor was destroyed by a storm. A pipeline system eventually carried fuel across the channel. Trucks moved ammunition, food, medical supplies, spare parts, and reinforcements. This next point explains everything. The invasion was not sustained by the bravery of the first waves alone. It was sustained by logistics. Every rifle required ammunition. Every tank required fuel. Every wounded soldier required evacuation. Every advance required roads, engineers, mechanics, and supplies. Germany could still fight effectively. It could no longer match the Allied ability to replace losses and expand the battle. In late July, American forces launched Operation Cobra and broke through the German front near Saint-Lô. Allied armies advanced across France. German forces were trapped and devastated around the Falaise pocket, although many escaped. Paris was liberated in August. Germany now faced the Soviet Union in the east and the Western Allies in France and Italy. Hitler's empire was being compressed from multiple directions. This was the final front that Nazi Germany could not close. The legacy of D-Day is often reduced to images of landing craft, beach obstacles, and soldiers running through gunfire. Those images are real, but they represent only part of the story. D-Day was a political achievement before it became a military one. Nations with different interests created a unified command. It was an intelligence victory built on deception and code-breaking. It was an industrial achievement powered by shipyards, factories, railways, and supply depots. It was a technological experiment involving airborne forces, amphibious vehicles, radar, naval gunfire, and specialized engineering equipment. Above all, it was a human gamble. Commanders could calculate tides, divisions, landing schedules, and ammunition requirements. They could not calculate every frightened soldier, every missed target, every damaged radio, or every moment when a small group would have to decide whether to move forward. Return to Omaha Beach on the morning of June 6. The original formations had broken apart. The plan was failing. The exits remained under fire. Men were trapped between the sea and the bluffs, yet they moved inland. Not because victory was certain, not because the defenses were weak. They moved because the invasion could succeed only if ordinary soldiers continued after the larger machinery of war had failed around them. D-Day opened Hitler's final Western Front because the Allies combined strategy, deception, industry, technology, and courage at a scale Germany could no longer match. It did not end the war, but it made the direction of the war increasingly irreversible. It changed the battlefield. It changed Europe. It changed history. D-Day proved that even the greatest invasion force ever assembled ultimately depended on individuals stepping from the water and choosing to advance. Subscribe for more cinematic documentaries about American military history, like the video, and tell us in the comments what part of the D-Day story surprised you most.